So, welcome to my basement. I wanted to make this video because the simplest build of a Pi1541 is very easy, and it has little to no coverage on YouTube compared to the full featured version. Before we get started, I have to note that I'm a happy owner of a SD2 IEC and have experienced no specific compat issues with it, so this video is not going to be to debate the differences of a Pi1541 versus an SD2 IEC. But I would like to showcase how easy it is to build this simpler version and how it differs from the full-fledged model, and especially why that doesn't matter, at least not for me. So when I started looking into the Pi1541 on YouTube and on the internet, it was images like this image from Tor Erik Bakke Lunde on PCBWay that was the most prominent one, where you have a dedicated hat for the Raspberry Pi. You have a LCD screen and two serial ports and a speaker and some LEDs. Then I started looking into the project from Steve White or his webpage, and I found this very nice link where he links to Kris Sekula's awesome work, as he says. And he has created a very simple setup with the bare minimum, meaning it's basically just the 1541 serial cable with one 4-channel bidirectional logic level converter, which he has pictured in this wiring diagram. So this is actually what I ended up building, and if you have a Raspberry Pi, this will set you back about 13 euros. It's about 6 euros for the Sparkfun logic level converter, and I also bought a new 1541 serial cable that I used for this project. Actually, if you have one cable, you have enough for two projects, as you have to cut it in half. So before we look at my version of this build, I would just like to show the end result that Kris Sekula is showing on his page, just to show how easy it is. You can see the end of the serial plug is hooked up to the Sparkfun logic level converter, and the other side is hooked up to the Raspberry Pi according to the wiring diagram, and that's basically everything you need. And then you need to prepare the SD card with the code, of course, to emulate the 1541. For this project I will also use some 3D printed parts that I had laying around from a different project, and it's housing for a Raspberry Pi in the form of a Amiga 1000. Firstly, you need to format the SD card to FAT32. If you have a very large SD card that is larger than 32 gigabytes, that's not automatically supported. You can delete the partition, which is probably exFAT, and then you create a new smaller one, about 30 gigabytes, and then you format this partition to FAT32. To set up the SD card, there are quite a few downloads needed. Firstly, you go to Steve White's page and download the latest SD card binaries, which can be downloaded here, and you save that. Then I download the kernel that fits the Raspberry Pi you have chosen to use in the project. Also, I download the disk image containing the file browser. This is used later to circumvent an issue with the fast load cartridge. Then you go down to the section where he describes the SD card setup. He discussing the format of the SD card, which we have mentioned. You go to the Raspberry Pi firmware page and download the latest firmware there. And then we have all the files needed, I think. We have the firmware from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. We have the Pi1541 binaries, which are from Steve White. We have the file browser, and we have the kernel that fits with the Raspberry Pi we use for this project. And we have also downloaded the latest Wise emulator files. The reason for this is that we need to supply the 1541 ROM file, and one place you can find that is in the Wise emulator. So I've created a folder called SD card. From the firmware we go into the boot section, and we copy over boot code bin, fix up, and start.elf, I think it is. Let me see, yes. You copy those over to the SD card we will prepare, and then we go into the Pi1541. We copy over everything to the folder we want to have for our SD card. I'm not sure which kernel version is actually used here and what Raspberry Pi it supports, so I just overwrite that one with the correct one we downloaded from Steve White's page based on which Raspberry Pi you use for the project, and we replace that file. Let me see. And then we needed, when we were done with the firmware from Raspberry Pi Foundation, we have taken the files from Steve White, and then we have to get the ROM file, which is inside the emulator folder under drives, and you pick the DOS 1541, for instance, or one of the other supported ones, and then you put that into your SD card as well. And then I think that is all the files you need. Fix up kernel, options, start elf, yeah. And then inside the 1541 I just remove everything, because I'm just going to use it for my Commodore 64 and my Commodore 128, and I copy in the new file browser, which I downloaded directly from Steve White's page, in the 1541 folder. And that's all the files you need. And then you also need some games maybe, and you create a new folder under the 1541 folder, and you can call it games. Remember to use all small or lowercase letters, because if you use uppercase letters then your Commodore 64 won't show them as letters, but instead show the special characters. And that also is the same for the games file you place in this folder, or program files if that is what you need. So once you have created all the entire setup, you copy it over to the SD card which you have formatted correctly, and that's it. When I started testing my newly built Pi1541, I immediately ran into a problem. My fast load cartridge didn't seem to work anymore, and everybody knows that loading a disk image on a real 1541 disk drive without some sort of fast loader is tedious at best. Luckily there's a simple solution, and it's well documented by Dave here on his homepage. The fix is simply to edit the option txt file on the SD card and uncomment the available option called auto mount image, as he has it detailed here in his post. You also need to download the file browser specified here from Steve White's page, and you can find it here on this link. And then just follow the instructions on Dave's page how to make it work. So, looking at the build, it's as easy as explained. It's just the cable for the disk drive, which I have cut in half, and I have soldered the end to the Sparkfun logic level converter, and hooked it up to the Pi according to the wire diagram. And I also hooked up a LED for the activity light. The activity light isn't functioning in the latest version of the Pi1541, but I'm sure Steve will fix it in the future. So next we will hook it up to my Commodore 128 and see if it works. So we will test it out using the file browser we added. We started it here, and I have a folder called games, and I will start Cobra for this test. So now we're loading, and then the file browser is the reason that you don't need all the buttons, because you control everything from your Commodore. And also I really don't like the speaker emulating the sound of the disk drive. It's fun for 2 minutes and then you switch it off forever. Now is the crack throw. And there, the game is loaded.